buttons here. Okay. And I'm going to.
We'll need to look into that Starlink thing.
Serlin?
Oh, you'll need to look into that Starlink thing.
Oh, Starlink. Oh, I don't really like EMF, so that's kind of a problem for me.
Ah, I see. Yeah, that would be an issue.
So somewhere around here, there's a way to share my screen. I can't figure it out.
I don't even know. They're starting to phase out DSL. I don't.
Bottom middle for the share screen.
Yeah, but I'm pressing it. It's not happening.
Oh,
There's a chance that I don't know how you entered the Zoom. You might not be the host. It's happened to me before.
Oh, really?
Is there a green button? So where it
Yes, that's a
says
good
share
question.
screen, is
Yeah,
there
yeah.
an arrow next to that?
Yeah, so I'm using an iPad, and it's a little bit different than. Oh, that's not right. Hang on. Sorry about this. Yes. Come on. Okay. I'm sharing my screen now. How do I get? Oh, I know how. All right. So you are done with Dr. Nairn. For some of you, that's probably a relief. And he is really smart. So I think I've looked up I looked at your introductions because the meeting was recorded, the class was recorded for Dr. Nairn's first class. So I think I have introductions for you all, but you may not have an introduction of me. So you can call me John, for one. Some people call me Dr. John. Some people call me Simon Johnson Minson. So I kind of respond to anything. I'm not really stuffy about things like that. I've been a professor here, or I've been on the faculty here at OSU for 30 years. And I'm a chemist by training. When I started out, I came from a background of wood preservation. So my family business was in wood preservation and selling wood treating chemicals. And so that's really how I got qualified to work here. And so I started out in wood preservation. From there, I moved to wood plastic composites, which we hopefully will have time to discuss. And from there, I moved to nanocellulose, polymer. It's mostly polymer composite. Most of the time here, I've worked in the area of polymer composites. So I'm a polymer guy. And so then I moved from wood plastic composites to nanocellulose, and I was started in nanocellulose in 2003. So I was kind of more or less an early adopter, and been doing that a long time. And then a couple of years ago, I got involved in hemp, and OSU has a center called the Global Hemp Innovation Center. I am the lead on the coalition for digital architecture and building products. So been involved with hemp quite a bit lately. And we're making hempcrete in the lab and working on different kinds of binders for hempcrete. Going to be trying to make building products out of hemp, hemp boards and things like that. So that's what I do. And the reason I have DSL is I live on a farm out in the foothills of the Cascades, and I really love it there, and growing hemp. I'm a hemp farmer besides my day job. This is my day job, but I'm also a hemp farmer. And I grow the hemp and sell CBD. So if anybody wants to buy some CBD, let me know. Or you can just go to the website, helios-organics.com. There,
And
that's
how's
enough.
the market?
For CBD.
Yeah, I heard it's been very saturated.
Yeah, it is. We're just getting started right now, trying to break in, but we're selling stuff. Not as much as we want, but but we really haven't. We're still in what we call soft launch, so we haven't really tried hard to sell to everybody, but we are selling stuff. And let's see here. So let's talk about the course. So this part of the course, unlike Dr. Nairn's part, which was really had a narrow focus, on this part, it's kind of a survey for everything. Hopefully everything you haven't covered it or haven't covered it in the same depth in the way that I'm going to here. And so so I expect you to, so the idea here is for you to understand and memorize some of the lingo involved with the various different aspects of wood science and be familiar with them. And so that you have enough facts and knowledge of how things work so that when you get a job and you walk into the office or the mill or the factory or the customer's site, you've got enough knowledge in these different areas that you can hold a decent conversation with them and sound like you know what you're talking about. So that's really my goal for this part of the course. And then you can see there the areas that we're going to cover. And also at the bottom there, this field of wood science it's really booming right now. And what's really happening is we're riding the wave of, I'll call it sustainability. Although I think that you do have homework and it's on Canvas. It's in module for week 7 module. And so I'm asking you to write an essay about sustainability, because things are changing with sustainability now. But there's still a huge interest from almost every different walk of life and industrial market to make things more sustainable, to make them green. And that's where wood comes in, and hemp. And renewable materials. Right? So you have chosen to be in a good place. You've caught the wave, and hopefully you get a good ride. Okay, so I will get the slides uploaded. I'll do my best. And the PowerPoint slides won't contain all the material, but probably I'm going to try to say I'm not super skilled on Canvas and Zoom and all that stuff, but I'll be annotating the slides, and I'll write on them with my little pen here, and save those. So hopefully you will have most of the material written down, and there will be some reading material. I'm going to put it in the module, so it'll be right there for you. And also learning objectives. I consider those the minimum. But if you've got the learning objectives down, you should pass the class, or at least my part of it. There's going to be 3 homework assignments, 3 labs, 1 exam, 8 lectures, and I'm going to put a practice exam on Canvas. It's not there yet. There will be some simple derivatives and integrals in the math, but mostly it's just algebra, baby math. Dr. Nairn does real math. I do baby math. And chemistry, I'm expecting a high school level of chemistry. You don't have to memorize equations. If you need an equation, I'll give it to you. I don't memorize equations. I don't expect you to. But as I mentioned before, memorizing the lingo and the vocabulary is, I think, something that's important for you as you get out of school and get out into the forest products industry, to be able to speak the language. Trying to get people out of the waiting room. And the return to PowerPoint is right next to the end. All right, so now what I need to do is this. So the first subject we're going to cover is durability and fire. We're only going to get through durability. Well, we won't get all the way through durability today. So we'll be talking about it on Thursday also. And then the lab on Thursday will be a treatability lab where we'll just watch a video, which is about all we can do, given that we're in remote. So, which I don't like. I don't know if you like it, but I don't like it. And but that's what we have to do. So, or get whacked. Okay, so biodeterioration. Here's a definition. It's caused by organisms, and here's a list. These are things that we'll talk about. Mammals and birds will just, it'll take me about 30 seconds to talk about those, but we'll spend some time on wood destroying fungi. They are the most, by far, the most destructive of the causal agents. And insects, it depends. You know, overall, they're not as destructive as fungi, but if they're in your house, if the termites are eating your house, then it feels like it, right? And so, let's see if the video plays.
Homes and many other types of buildings have long been constructed of materials made from wood. When properly maintained and protected, buildings made from wood can last for centuries. Termites and wood-destroying insects have long been blamed for the destruction
Can you
of
hear
wood
that? Can you
used in
turn your
buildings,
volume up and
but
hear
they are
it?
not the only culprits. Wood also makes for an ideal food source.
No, it's fine right now.
Fungi.
Okay.
Fungi, commonly referred to as mold, can quickly begin to grow on or in wood materials when there is sufficient moisture and temperatures that are conducive for its growth. Some types of mold are primarily found growing on the surface of wood. This is commonly the case when there has been a water damaging event in a building caused by a leaking pipe, elevated humidity, or some type of flood. The mold may be easily visible and can cause staining. When mold is growing on the surface of the wood, it may become aerosolized and cause indoor air quality and health concerns for building occupants. This type of mold growth can often be removed by qualified professionals and the wood material treated to remove stains. Other types of fungi not only use the wood as a food source, but also cause decay by breaking down the wood fibers. There are species that will attack living trees and others that will consume dead wood that has been used to construct a building. These wood decay fungi are classified based on the type of decay they cause. The most well-known types include brown rot, white rot, and soft rot. Wood decay fungi can cause extensive damage and may not show visible signs of their presence for some time. The damage can be severe enough to even cause structural concerns. Some estimates have put the amount of wood required each year just to replace wood rot at approximately 10% of the U.S. annual wood production. These are just a few things to know about wood decay, wood rot, and surface fungi.
All right, so you can see that wood destroying fungi can be a pretty serious problem. Can be catastrophic. So this is a cooling tower. So they take hot water and it falls down these wood slats, and as it falls down, they blow air through it. And you've probably seen these, but if it goes, it can be a disaster. Okay, so fungus is singular, fungi is plural. Some people say fungi, some people say fungi. And my joke about that is a mushroom walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve people like you." And the mushroom says, "Why not? I'm a fun guy." So sorry if that didn't make you laugh.
That was a real knee slapper.
Yeah. All right. So fungi are heterotrophic, which means they have to eat something else. They're not like green plants like grass that take CO2 and water and make sugar using sunlight as their energy source. The fungi have to eat something else, some other living organism. And so the life cycle there is abbreviated. And that's generally what I want you to remember. But we're going to go over it in a bit more detail. And here's a video. Paul Stamets lives up on the Olympic Peninsula and sells mushrooms, all different kinds. Oops. Sorry. Just trying to adjust the volume. Well, now I've goofed it up. Volume is up. Like this video. I can't get it to play. Okay, well,
It is going.
yeah, it's hard to see though, right?
It's pretty tiny, yeah.
Yeah, so
I think you have to go in presentation mode again before.
Mushroom mycelium represents rebirth,
what do I need to do?
rejuvenation, regeneration.
You can try dragging it on the
Fungi
corners. See if
generate
it
soil
makes
Yeah.
it
that
bigger.
gives life.
Drag. Okay, we're gonna watch it this way. But
If you go into presentation mode, it might work like before. And then
oh
it
yeah,
was-
right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. So anyway, this fellow lives on the Olympic Peninsula and has a company, grows mushrooms, mostly from wood, medicinal mushrooms and stuff.
Mushroom mycelium represents rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life. The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I, in particular, believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy of our skill set for communication. We have now learned that there are these languages that are occurring and communication between each organism. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves. We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that? If I die trying, but I'm inadequate to the task to make a course change in the evolution of life on this planet, okay, I tried. The fact is, I tried. How many people are not trying? If you knew that every breath you took could save hundreds of lives into the future, had you walked down this path of knowledge, wouldn't you run down that path of knowledge as fast as you could? I believe nature is a force of good. Good is not only a concept, it is a spirit. And so hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive.
Okay. So it was a really beautiful photography, and a good message, in my opinion. So here's a picture of the fungal life cycle, and mycelium is a word you need to know. Spores, germination. Note that they are sexual and asexual, so they can combine, or if the fungus can't find, if the mycelium need to merge in order to have sexual fruiting. So you can kind of see that here. So there's really two different mycelium, and they merge at these points, and that's where the sexual union takes place. If there's not enough, if there aren't enough mushrooms in the area, then they'll go ahead and reproduce asexually. So then I assume you get a clone then, right? So with sexual, then you have a regular combination.
Fungi have their own unique methods of reproduction. As one typical example, let us examine the life cycle of a mushroom. As we have already learned, mushrooms are actually just the spore-producing fruiting bodies that arise from a large underground mycelium of hyphae threads, and their gills are where the spore-making basidia are located. Inside of each basidium are two haploid nuclei that come from different parent organisms. Fertilization occurs when these nuclei fuse together to form a single diploid nucleus. But this diploid nucleus doesn't last long because it undergoes meiosis to form 4 haploid nuclei. Then 4 tiny sacs develop on the surface of each basidium, and the nuclei migrate into the sacs and develop into basidiospores. A typical mushroom produces about 10 billion of these reproductive spores. As the mature spores fall toward the earth, they are sometimes carried great distances by the wind. In fact, most of the time, the air around us is filled with all sorts of fungal spores. After a spore lands, if the conditions are favorable, it begins to germinate like the seed of a plant, and hyphae begin to sprout from it. As the spores germinate, the parent mushrooms melt away as the nutrients in the soil are used up. Eventually, beneath the ground, the hyphae of the newly germinated fungus will mate with hyphae of another fungus. As a result, cells with 2 nuclei from 2 parent fungi are formed. Then these hyphae rapidly grow into a mycelium, which will thrust new mushrooms up through the soil, thereby completing this fungus's reproductive cycle.
Okay, so if you need a review, there it is. Geez. Okay. So the fruiting bodies are where the spores are. You can actually take a mushroom and cut off the stem and put it on a piece of paper, and the spores will drop down and you'll get what's called a spore print. I had a hard time trying to find, one of my pet peeves is electron microscope pictures that don't have a scale bar. I had a really hard time trying to find the few, but I found a couple. So you can see that the fungal spores are generally bigger than 1 micron. So if you have a 1 micron filter, generally you're going to get rid of most of the spores. And here's an interesting colored picture. I don't think that's real color. And then the bottom right shows you a picture of the spores being released, which is pretty cool. And there are spores everywhere. So Jerry Presley in his lab up on the 2nd floor of Richardson has billions and billions of spores, and they are all over the building. So I know because they have infected my stuff down on the 1st floor. And in truth, spores are everywhere. You cannot really escape them unless you're inside of a 1 micron filter. Right? And more pictures, there's different kinds of spores, and so you can get some idea of how big they are. Right? So the spores then kind of sprout, and they make mycelium. So you can see the pictures here, what they look like. And I imagine you've seen that in nature. So I hope so. Hope everybody's seen mycelium, right? But maybe didn't know the name. And the individual little threads there are called hyphae. Right? So the mycelium is composed of hyphae. And that's where the action is. That's where the enzyme action is that, in our case, and what we're interested in, dissolves wood. So here you see some more, what the hyphae look like. This is my favorite hyphae picture. So here they took mushrooms and grew them with a genetic modification that gave green, that turned them green. So you can see here that this is a wood cell, and you can see that the hyphae is going right through the cell wall, right? And it's that's bad if you're trying to build a house out of it. So they don't have any problem at all consuming the wood. They do it with enzymes, and we're going to talk about that, right? And then once you have the mycelium and they get ready to reproduce, then you get a fruiting body, and the cycle is complete. So this is kind of for fun, and it's kind of, I think it's really interesting. So fungi can infect other things besides wood or plants. And here's an example.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a cordyceps fungus.
So that's the zombie fungus. So this is an example of what can happen if you don't have good protection on the wood. Then this is a disaster. So when a power line goes down, the liability is enormous, and so power company utilities go to great lengths to avoid this sort of thing from happening. So now let's talk about the 3 different kinds of fungi that infect wood. And the first one is brown rot. So the reason it's brown is because it primarily attacks the cellulose or the carbohydrates. So the lignin is left behind, the lignin is brown, cellulose is white. So it's called brown rot. Brown rot is the most destructive for conifers. So here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of pine, which is what we build most structures out of, right? When we build out of wood, it's mostly fir or pine. So when brown rot attacks them, you get strength reduction at early stages. In Jerry's lab upstairs, typically the way that they will test for the amount of wood decay is to weigh a piece of wood. So they weigh it, they let the mushroom or the fungus do its thing, and then they weigh it again, and you get a weight loss because remember, the fungus eats the wood, turns it into energy, emits CO2, and so there's a weight loss. The brown rot fungi can show a 90% loss in strength with a 5% loss in weight. So they reduce the strength at early stages, and I'm not sure it's I'm not sure it's a theory or it's a hypothesis, I think at this point, is that what's going on there is that the cellulose is what makes the tree strong, but the cellulose is surrounded by hemicellulose, which is surrounded by lignin. And what happens here is that they think that the brown rot attacks the hemicellulose, and thus it allows the cellulose to bend, and so you get this big strength loss without that much weight loss. So I think it's interesting. It's interesting to me because it kind of relates to like if the cellulose is like the rebar, then it's allows if rebar with joints in it, then the brown rot eats the thing that keeps the joints stiff, so now it can bend. So the next one is white rot. So it utilizes all of the wood components, as it says here, but it's will eat the lignin a little bit faster, so you end up with a white color, and you can see it there in the picture. It's more common on hardwoods than on conifers. You know, there are thousands, maybe more than thousands of different species and varieties of fungi. And they each feed on some specific organism in the environment. So the white rots are prevalent on hardwoods, while the brown rots are more prevalent on softwoods conifers. And also, I should mention that the decay process takes place as a succession of different organisms. And generally, the first thing that attacks is bacteria. Like when a tree falls down in the forest, the first thing that will go in and start decomposing it is bacteria. Then the fungi come, the insects come, and eventually it falls apart. So returns to soil. And here's, I think this fellow mentions that.
Okay, two of the types of wood decay that we recognize is based upon the chemistry of the fungus that's involved in terms of the degradation or the breakdown of the two major components of woody plant cells, and that is the cellulose and the lignin component. If the lignin is degraded first, it leaves behind kind of a bleached appearance in the wood, which is primarily exposing the cellulose. Lignin is a brownish compound in color, and as a result, as the fungus degrades the lignin, the brownish color disappears, leaving behind the lighter color or almost white color of the cellulose. And if we look down to this log here, this is an example of a white rot. It also shows very nicely how well decayed this particular log is and how good a particular wood decay fungus can decay a log. This point is almost back to nutrient recycling stage in the cycle. And if we take a pull back here and look, you can see how light colored that wood is. And that gives a very good indication that the lignin component has been removed, and this would be described as a white rotter or caused by a white rot fungus. Give you an idea of how much this wood has been degraded in terms of its structural strength. You can just simply take this wood and it'll crumble apart in your hand. You can see that the next stage is going to be almost like incorporation into the soil, becoming a very important organic component of the soil. This is also a rich substrate for many insects and also small animals as well. Okay, here's an example of a brown rot, or the rot caused by a brown rot fungus. And as you can see, compared to a white rot, the difference in color, for example. In the case of brown rot, we have a situation where the fungi responsible are producing enzymes that break down the cellulose and leave behind the lignin component, which is this reddish brown or dark brown color. As it turns out, both of these are very important in the recycling system within a forest. In the case of brown rot, and we find that most decay that occurs on conifers is a brown rot type of decay. It is very common for this to be an excellent source for retention of water, which provides then a very nice substrate for plants to grow in, and especially trees for some reason. And this is a very good case in point. Here you can see where the roots of a nearby tree, a very small tree, has permeated through this brown rot piece of wood, producing not only the large lateral roots or perennial roots, but also the small feeder roots. Here's an example of brown rot in a pine log. It's laying on the ground, and as I remove this material here, you can see the brown discoloration that is caused by the breakdown of the cellulose, leaving the lignin component behind. This particular log does show another function for these decayed logs, and that is what we call a nurse log or a nursery log. In many instances, the wood is decayed to a point where the seeds of certain trees will fall in there and germinate, and you'll get a nice group of seedlings coming up in here. This particular case, obviously a maple seed had fallen in here, and we have a small maple seedling develop. Chances are that will develop into a tree. The roots will go down into this log itself and eventually into the soil. Now, in contrast, if we look at this brown rot and compare it to the white rot, we can see the difference. Remember, in the case of a white rot, the lignin component of the woody plant cell walls is removed, leaving behind basically cellulose, which eventually is broken down, but initially removal of the brown compound lignin will cause this bleach-like appearance, whereas in contrast, a brown decay or brown rot, the cellulose, the white component, is removed, leaving this dark component, the lignin, primarily behind. Lignin is a very tough substance. It is full of polyphenols. It is quite resistant to breakdown. Eventually it is broken down, but these logs will often remain, at least in part, in the soil, providing some very nice sites for water retention, which allows roots and, as you can see here, perhaps small seedlings to come up, acting as a nurse log.
Okay. And here's brown rot in a house. This is what you don't want to see. And notice that it's the wood that's on top of the concrete that's decayed. Kind of scary. So, brown rot in a house. Now, these this is from Paul Stamets's book, and so I've circled in red here some of the mushrooms that I'm familiar with, and I take them as nutritional supplements from time to time. And they have, but these number of these mushrooms have medicinal properties, and these particular ones, the cordyceps was the zombie fungus, but it also will grow other places besides ants and insects. Reishi grows on wood, maitake grows on wood. So,
Are you telling us you're a zombie, John? Is that
no,
what
no. I don't think I have any cordyceps infection in me, but if I stop moving and stuff starts growing out of my head, well, you'll know. So this is, so the point is that the wood decay fungi, yes, they destroy wood, but at the same time, they can be medicinal. So there's good and there's bad, right? As always. Now, a third kind is called soft rot. So there's two different kinds of soft rot, type 1 and type 2. And so type 1 puts cavities in the middle lamella. Type 2 does not attack the middle lamella, but it does attack the S2 layer, which of course is where most of the cellulose is, where most of the strength is. This bottom picture is, well, the top picture is a picture of what the wood looks like when it has soft rot. The bottom picture is a way that people test for wood decay. You take a screwdriver and see how far you can push it in. You know, if it's solid wood that's not decayed, the screwdriver is not going to go very far, but you can see here, you've got quite a lot of decay. So the thing about soft rot is they require an environment where they stay wet most of the time. So. So here are the cavities in type 1. You can see the cavities are here in the middle lamella, right? And if we look at type 2, get rid of this. You can see the middle lamella is intact and the S2 layer is being eaten alive. So those are the two different types of soft rot. So you've got brown rot, white rot, soft rot, and the soft rot has two different types. So those are the things you need to remember. I hope your apartment doesn't look like this. If it does, it's probably pretty.
How do you differentiate the brown rot from soft rot?
Well, it's not easy, and generally people will do it by just noting that the decay is that the wood is really wet, right? So if the wood is really wet, the brown rot doesn't require that the wood be particularly wet. It has to be, we'll talk about how wet it has to be, but with soft rot, typically it has to be really wet. And so that's one indication. So if the wood is squishy and water comes out, things like that, it's a good indication that it's soft rot. But a lot of times it's hard to tell. So I don't know. Maybe Dr. Presley can tell you how he can tell the difference, but from my experience, it's pretty hard to tell.
You have to confirm with microscopy.
Yeah, you can confirm it with microscopy or PCR, or all the different ways that they do it. Today, most of the time, I think they throw everything in the PCR machine, press the button, and get the answer. So this is now we can talk about molds and stain, also fungi, but remember, each different species attacks a different organism or a different part of the organism. And so here we have a mold, and what molds do is they attack the free sugars, the proteins, the sap, basically, right? The mold eats the sap and doesn't really affect the wood that much. So you don't get that much strength loss with mold. You do get discoloration, and which reduces the value of the wood, but you can still use it. And then some people try to do a good job of marketing and say, well, this blue stain pine is really different looking and intriguing, and all marketing words, and sell it to you. And some people like it. So there you go. I like this picture because this is not the edge of the picture. This is the edge of the board up here. So what happened here was they took the lumber. When the lumber comes in, the log comes into the mill, it's wet, right? It's 100% or more moisture content. You make lumber, you dry it, saw it, right? So or that's what they did with this piece. So what happened here was they took the wet lumber, they dried it, but they were in a hurry, and they must have been, and I'm assuming that they were in a hurry, because they didn't dry it all the way down. So here would be heartwood, right? So this is the heart here, and this is the sap up here. And so what they did was they dried the surface, but they didn't get it dry all the way down to the heartwood. So the mold fungi, mold and stain, that synonyms people use it interchangeably, attacked they are colored, and the fungi itself is colored, and it's eating the sugars and the sap and the sapwood, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so they can do increased permeability because they're reducing the amount of stuff that's in the vessels and things like that. And you can get reduced toughness because of that, because it's generally on the surface, right? So this piece of lumber looked like it was good with no mold infection, but then when they ripped the board, they saw that it was infected because it was still wet enough for the fungus to attack down inside the sapwood. I thought I could save this with annotations, but I don't think I can. Okay, so what does it take for a fungus to grow? Food, of course, right temperature range, moisture, and oxygen. So they the fungus will feed on something. It's heterotrophic. It feeds on something and it also requires oxygen. So, and you need a pH, right? So you need wood, you need oxygen, and you need a temperature in a specific range, and you need water, and you need a pH in a reasonable range. The optimum pH range for most fungi, I forget if I have a slide on this, is the same as the pH of the wood. Surprise, surprise. So the temperature range that fungi like is pretty close to what we like. 35 is really hot, but 90 something. But that's their optimum. They won't grow below freezing, and at 46 is too hot. So that's Celsius. So we're not going to be able to stop fungal growth in our structures, in our buildings, by adjusting the temperature, unless you like living below freezing. pH range is 3 to 6, which, as I mentioned, is pretty much the same temperature range as the wood. So that doesn't help, right? Although I can say that one of the things that you can do, and we do this with hemp, is you can put it in cement, which has a pH of 12. Because it has a pH of 12, it's immune to fungal decay. So if you encase the wood with cement, concrete, which is done, then there are commercial products that are wood-filled concrete and replace the aggregate with wood. It makes it lightweight, but it won't burn, it won't rot. The insects won't attack it. Okay. And water. So the water is really important, and there's a fundamental principle here. As I always like to say, if you want to be successful in life, understand the fundamentals, because once you understand the fundamentals, you are in a position to be able to apply those to all the different situations that come up and solve the problem, hopefully. So you may need some specialized knowledge, but if you, from time to time, but understanding the fundamentals, number one, it makes you feel legitimized, like you legitimately know what's going on, and it really does help you to solve problems. So understanding fundamentals is important. And one of the fundamentals of fungal growth is water. So we saw the hyphae drilling through the wood cells, and they do that with enzymes. There's some other, that's not a 100.0%. There's some other mechanisms that go on. But in general, most fungi use enzymes to drill through for the hyphae to drill through the wood. The enzymes are secreted by the hyphae. And so you think about it, it's an enzyme, right? It dissolves in water. If there's no liquid water around, the enzyme can't move, and it can't diffuse to the wood surface and start the decay process, right? So you have to have, in order for the water, in order for the decay to take place, you have to have enough water in the wood for the enzymes to dissolve in the water and diffuse. They're emitted from the hyphae, diffuse through the water, and attack the wood. So that's what these words here mostly mean, right? And also water will swell and soften the wood, so that makes it a bit easier too. So think about some more fundamentals. If you're below the fiber saturation point, you're not going to have any liquid water. There's no way for the enzyme to diffuse to the wood surface and decay, and cause decay, right? So industrially, in order to give us a margin of safety, people typically will dry wood to 20% moisture content or less. And when you do that through long experience, people find that it does not decay. Optimum is 40 to 80%. So 40 to 80%, the cells are not full of water, but there's enough water, there's room for the hyphae to move, and there's enough water for the enzymes to attack. Once you get up to 190 to 200% moisture content, generally it doesn't have anything to do with enzymes anymore, but the fungus requires oxygen to survive. It breathes. And with that much water in the wood, there's not enough oxygen to support fungal growth. So oxygen depletion. Ted Sheffer was a researcher here. He's on the faculty here at OSU. He passed away, oh, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. And he worked here till he was 98 years old. And so he came up with this climate index, still used today, and it shows you where decay is prevalent. So you can see down in Florida, you have high decay rates, or they have a high climate index, and as a result, you have high decay rates. The idea here is that the climate index is directly proportional to the rate of decay. You can see it in the Mountain West, and in the Southwest, where you have deserts and dry mountains, and you have very low decay rates up here where we are. Let's see, we're going to be right around here somewhere. You can have high decay rates on the coast, and then they decrease as you go inland and the rainfall goes down. So okay, we've covered fungi. So bacteria. The bacteria generally don't, as I mentioned before, they're generally the first things that attack the wood. They can be used to remove the pit membrane. So we'll talk about that on Thursday when we talk about aspirated pits and Douglas fir and how that interferes with the treating process. And bacteria can be used to remove the pit membranes. They will selectively target the pit membranes. They can also degrade extractives. They can digest cell walls, but generally bacterial infection doesn't cause a huge amount of strength loss in the wood. But once the bacteria have done a job, then the fungi will move in and the strength loss will ensue forthwith. So people have tried to use bacteria, like they take the previous wood decay expert here was Jeff Morrell was his name. He's moved to Australia. And so he did some experiments where they took a pond and they seeded the pond with these bacteria and threw a bunch of wood in. And what they were hoping would happen was that the bacteria would eat the pit membranes and improve the treatability of the wood. So it kind of sort of worked, but it didn't really work well enough that it's been adopted commercially. So here's an example of bacterial decay. Now the bacteria have had a long time, 14th century. The bacteria have had a long time to decay this wood, right? But you can see that they can destroy the wood given enough time. And this is underwater too, so. Okay, so much for bacteria. Moving right along, here's insects. So we have termites, ants, bees, and wasps, Hymenoptera, beetles, Coleoptera, termites, Isoptera. So if you're not a biologist, this is where orders fit into the whole class. So at the top you have life, at the bottom you have species, and this is order. So within the order there are still families and genuses and, or genii, don't know, and species. Not a biologist. I don't expect you to memorize this chart. I just that I didn't know where things fit, so I looked it up. Okay, so termites. They're social, like bees. They have a queen, workers, soldiers, and they eat the wood, but they don't actually digest the wood. They have symbiotic protozoa in their gut, and that's what actually has the cellulase that will eat the cellulose and other things that will destroy the lignin. They're temperate, so 50 degrees north, 50 degrees south. That's pretty far. When you get either above or below 50 degrees latitude, it's pretty cold in general. Right? We're at 45, so 50 degrees north is going to be in Canada somewhere. All right. So we'll look at, yes.
Now, is it true you don't get many termites in this part of the country?
No, you can have termites here.
Really? Okay, I've heard. Yeah. Huh.
It's not as bad here as it is in other places, but I've seen them. So, yeah, but it's not the threat that it is in places like New Orleans, and we'll talk about that, or even Southern California. So there's three different kinds: damp wood, subterranean, and dry wood. So you have, again, you have reproductives that are queens and kings, and everybody else is sterile. Even though they're male and female, they don't mate, and those are soldiers and workers. So then you can see them eating wood there. So damp wood termites are here in the Pacific Northwest and also in Florida, places where it's damp, right? So this is probably the coast range, right? To answer your question. You're not going to see a bunch of termites on the, well, you may see some, but probably on the east side of the mountains, probably fewer, right? So these require wet wood. They have small colonies, which is several thousand is small. Right? And there you can see some pictures of what they look like. So you have soldiers and workers. The more common are subterranean termites. Here you have enormous colonies, 1 to 5 million. And these little critters commute to work and where they live in the soil, and then they will come out of the soil and they will build, as you see in the bottom left picture here, the arrow is pointing to a mud tube. So they produce these tubes and they crawl up inside the tube up to the wood and eat the wood. So they keep them protected away from predators, things like that. So they basically commute to work. And on the bottom right here, if you see that in your apartment, call the manager. So you've got a serious problem. And here is when the colony gets large enough, it's like bees. When the colony gets large enough, bees will swarm, and when the colony gets large enough, termites will swarm. So here's a video about
Literally
that.
thousands of them. They're all over, swarming heavy. can see them on branches of some weeds that are popping up.
Can you hear that okay?
Out of the ground.
Yep.
You can also see them accumulating on this log. Just thick, thick, thick. Amazing. They're getting all over me, in fact. But these are the reproductives, the kings and queens that will leave an existing colony. And from here, they will get airborne. They'll fly off. As you can see, there's literally thousands of them just hit in the air, and they'll continue this trek into the woods. Many of the males and females will mate and consequently start new colonies.
All right. Now, when I was in high school, I spent some time working with a pest control company. These were back in the days when they use all kinds of toxic chemicals. They don't do that much anymore. Mostly they use pheromones and traps now for termites. But back then they sprayed with toxic chemicals, and the operator he knew that when one house on the block got infected, that he was going to make a lot of money, because they would spray that house and the termites would swarm and just go to the next house. So you just go down the block making money. So hopefully those days are gone. So termites are not always obvious. So you can see here from the picture, it looks like a nice house. They took off the drywall, and you can see, you kind of have to look close in this picture to see that there's problems, but there's problems, right? And you get a little bit closer, you can see that the termites had absolutely destroyed the place. And even the floor, you can see that eating out the bottom part of the posts that are holding everything up. So, serious issue. You lose the studs, you lose the house. So termites can be a really expensive problem. Oh, and there's another one. So you can see how bad it can be. So a number of years ago, there was, like in the 90s, a long time ago now, there was a big hullabaloo. Like today, it's, what is it, Jay? Murder wasps or something like that. So every once in a while, there's this big scare about insects that are going to destroy the world. So back in the 90s, there was a big scare about Formosan termites. And you see there's some in Southern California, but mostly, you can see they're mostly around New Orleans. Lots of wood structures, lots of people build with wood in New Orleans. And the Formosan termites are aggressive. People were concerned they were gonna just eat the town and destroy the town, and everything was gonna fall down, blah, blah, blah. They're subterranean termites, and they are aggressive, and they were causing a tremendous amount of damage. There was, the city was looking at passing ordinances saying that if you're going to build, you have to build out of treated wood, because the people in the wood treating industry did the studies and found that the same wood treatments that work for ordinary termites work for Formosan termites. So you didn't really have to change anything to stop them. You just have to use treated wood instead of untreated wood. But of course, untreated wood is cheaper than treated wood. So, and the Formosan termites are very prevalent in Hawaii, and in Hawaii, they do have regulations and city ordinances and things like that, that when you build, things in contact with the ground have to be treated. So, because the termites are a really serious problem in Hawaii. Okay, dry wood termites. So very dry wood, less than 13%. So there's less below the fiber saturation point, and that's just down in the desert. So you see the termites have adapted to different environmental conditions so that they can survive in more places. And they generally attack wood above the ground. So they look different than the subterraneans. Okay. Got a few minutes left. So Hymenoptera. So this covers carpenter ants, carpenter bees, and Cyrex wasps. And carpenter ants, they will, they're ants, so they're social insects, they have queens and workers, etc. And they do not eat the wood. So you can see here, they're taking, what they're doing is excavating a home. Would you call it a hive? They're excavating tunnels that they live in because they use the wood for shelter. And then they forage outside of the, they're making a nest, that's what you call it. They attack softer woods, and you can see here in the little video that they'll eat the early wood because it's softer than the late wood. So you'll get this interesting kind of attack, right? And they generally have smaller colonies. They're generally larger ants too. They look generally larger than most of the ants around here. I don't know if they ever treated the forestry cabin up in PV Forest, but there were tons of carpenter ants up there. And the way you tell is a thing called frass. So you saw the ants dropping the little pieces of sawdust out of their nest, and that is called frass. And this is what it looks like here in the pictures. And so that's how you can tell you got carpenter ants. So then I saw this up at the forestry cabin in PV Arboretum. And as I mentioned, they're a bit lazy, so they'll eat the softer. I mean, why not, right? Just go for the easy stuff. It saves you energy, less energy expenditure for the same result. So carpenter bees, they drill holes in the wood, and some videos here. So I think this, I'm not sure if this wood is treated or not, but the bee tastes it and doesn't particularly like it. So I think he's trying to chew. You can see the little white dot where he was chewing and gave up. So it might be treated wood, because treated wood is quite a bit harder, stiffer than regular wood. And then here's another video about carpenter bees.
There are many species of bees in the world, and some, like the honeybee, are much appreciated by humans. But that's not true of all bee species. Take, for instance, the carpenter bee. In front of me here, we have two bees that look very similar to each other. Now, you may notice that the carpenter bee looks very similar to a bumblebee, but the bumblebee has a fuzzy rear end, or abdomen, and the carpenter bee has a shiny abdomen. Now, carpenter bees like to work with wood. Okay, if you have a wooden structure at home, like a deck or a fence, or even if your house is made of wood, you may have noticed one of these holes drilled in there and wondered, hey, what is up with that? This is the work of the carpenter bee. If you open it up, you'll be amazed to see how much damage is going on in there. Now, from the perspective of the female carpenter bee, this is not damage. This is simply a nursery where she raises her young. And what she does is she'll go out into the garden, she gathers up pollen from flowers, and she'll roll that pollen up into like a little soccer ball, which she rolls down to the end of this tunnel. She'll lay a single egg on it, seal it shut. She goes out and gathers more pollen, rolls it up into a ball, rolls it down here, lays an egg, seals it shut, and she keeps doing that in sequence until she gets to the entrance. She seals that up, and then she flies away. In the meantime, the babies have hatched. They're feeding on that pollen ball. They undergo complete metamorphosis into an adult form, and then they are going to emerge, fly away, and maybe drill more holes in your house. Now, as damaging as the carpenter bee is, you've got to appreciate their incredible woodworking skills. From the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, thank you for observing a moment of science.
Okay, and the bottom right then is a picture of a happy bee in his little hole, her little hole. So, Cyrus wasps. They're present worldwide. They're a serious issue in Australia, not so much here. So as it says here, bores through the bark and lays eggs, carries a wood-destroying fungus to feed the larvae. And there are beetles that do something similar. So we're going to talk about beetles, I think, next. But probably next time, because we're almost out of time. Let's see. So you see that it bores through the bark and lays eggs like a carpenter bee. Although maybe doesn't go into the wood as far, just underneath the bark. But it does then have a wood-destroying fungus that it leaves behind to feed, that the larva then can feed on the feed on the fungus, actually. Right. So, serious problem in Australia. And then there's different kinds of coleoptera, beetles, pre-harvest, post-harvest, and wood products. This is a picture of a buprested beetle. Very pretty. So I think I'll stop here. This video is, we don't have time to get through the video. And but probably you've heard about bark beetles. They typically attack weakened trees, but because of people doing managed forest and planting trees closer together than they really want to be in order to optimize profit, then you get weakened trees that are susceptible to disease and drought and smog. Right. So there has been enormous damage from bark beetles here, and especially in Canada. If you fly, it's a number of years ago now, but I flew from Edmonton to Vancouver, and you fly over the mountains, and it was all dead. All the trees were just dead. It was amazing, the devastation. So, and Colorado's been hit hard too. So we'll stop there. Any questions? And I should mention, if you do have a question, just speak up, or don't. I can't see the chat, or maybe if I knew how, I could, but I don't want to monitor the chat. I'm focused on the slides.
Oh, that's fine. It's mostly a peanut gallery.
I was going to say. Not a lot going on there.
So if you've got, if you do have questions, then speak up. And so we're done for today. I will stick around for a few minutes. Stop share. Okay.
All right. Well, sounds good.
That's it. So see you on Thursday. I've still got a few more things to upload to the module, so check the module. But the homework is up. You can have a look at that. And
When's the homework due?
homework's due a week from today.
Okay.
Okay. See you Tuesday.
Yeah. See you Thursday.
I think there are
Thursday,
no
one of those
Zoom
things,
links
yes,
yet
2 days from now.
for Thursday.
Yeah, are there Zoom meetings for Thursday?
Yeah, I have to put him up. I thought I
Cool.
just made a bad assumption. I assumed that Dr. Nairn did the whole term and he didn't. So I'll get those up today. So we'll have, yeah, you just go to Zoom on Canvas and you should be able to get there. That worked today, right?
I'm here.
Yeah, sure did.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think most of the Zoom links are up now.
It looks like only the Tuesday meetings are.
Yeah, that's all I
Oh, only
had.
Tuesday. Okay.
I had time to put up, but I'll put up the Thursday lecture and lab today. So they'll all be there for you. All right.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Steve.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Thanks. See ya.
All right.